In this video, we're going to talk about the one-to-one email feature, how to use it, and how to make sure the system is properly set up for it to work the way that it should. So you can see here, I started a new automation. I named it one-to-one email demo, and we're going to skip over the start trigger for now. We'll come back to that. And first, I want to talk about the two different options that we have here and what the difference is between send an email and send a one-to-one email. So send an email is the traditional process that we're used to for putting together a mass email. When you choose this option, this is what's going to allow you to choose a template, to edit that template, to specify who it's coming from, the subject line, things like that. It's the traditional CRM email process. Whereas a one-to-one email, if I click and drag this down, you'll notice immediately it's very different. It's not taking us through that email designer or the template selector, and we're much more limited on the options that we can choose from here. Now, we still can add personalization. So for example, if I click this lightning bolt, I can go ahead and add in specific information for this contact, both in the subject and in the message. But as you can see, we're much more limited as far as what this message looks like. So we can't put in the stylized buttons that we can in the standard email templates. We're not going to be able to put in certain format elements. We won't be able to put in social links in the way that they appear in our other emails. And there's a very good reason for that. The purpose of a one-to-one email is to have a much more personalized outreach to a contact, especially a contact who you haven't reached out to before or who doesn't know who you are and is not expecting your communication. So for a one-to-one email to be sent, contacts actually don't have to be added to a list in the CRM in order to get this email. And the reason is the email is truly being sent directly from your email address, not from the CRM, even though it's being triggered by the CRM and sending out automatically. So when a one-to-one email goes out to a contact, let's say you're using Gmail, for example, if you log into your Gmail account and you go to your sent folder, you will see the emails in your sent folder because even though the system is automating the process, it is truly being sent from your email address. So as I mentioned, because it's being sent from your email and not from the system itself, you don't have to add the contact to a list in order to receive this email. Whereas if we go the traditional email route, they do have to be on a list in order to get that automated email. The second main benefit of the one-to-one email is because they don't have to be on a list and it's coming directly from you, the email does not have an unsubscribe button. So you don't have to worry about a bunch of contacts unsubscribing. Now, you still run the risk of them marking this email as spam, right? That's not something that we can control from a system's end. If the email doesn't apply to them, doesn't pertain, and doesn't grab their attention, they very well may still mark it as spam. So you still have to make sure that the subject and the message are applicable to the recipient that's getting this type of email. But they're not going to unsubscribe. You don't have to worry about them being removed from all lists and all future communication from the system. As I mentioned at the end of the day, this email is going to look like you took the time in your email account to write out this personal message to send to this contact versus it being sent by a system. So when we're talking about prospecting, for example, reaching out to a list of agents that have never worked with you and never heard from you, this may be a much better way to reach out over email versus sending an email that's very stylized, that although it may look sharp, it's clearly coming from a system and not as personal of an outreach to that agent. So a couple of things that we need to be aware of when it comes to one-to-one emails. You can see here at the top, we're getting a notification. One or more non-deal triggers have been identified in this automation. This action works with deal triggers only. For all other triggers, contacts will skip this action. So in other videos, we break down the deals section within the CRM. But if I go ahead and click in here real quick just to show you what this section is, this is going to be where we have our different stages within a pipeline. And then within these different stages, we have different deals that are assigned to contacts and are handled by either yourself or one of the reps at your company. And then in these deals, we can assign individual tasks that need to be done, such as calling that contact or sending them something in the mail or visiting them at their office. And so we can create these different pipelines. And right now we have one for prospecting: cold, warm, and hot. So in order for that one-to-one email to work, essentially what the system is saying is that the start trigger to that automation needs to be tied into the deals section. So if I go ahead and let me exit out of this, click on add a start trigger, it's going to open up our menu option here. And if we filter down by sales and CRM, not all of these are going to count. The main one that we're going to focus on and what we would want to do building out this sequence is deal stage changes or enters a pipeline. And so, for example, if we want to do enters a pipeline, we could say that the pipeline is prospecting, right? And it's only going to enter them into this sequence once they go into the prospecting sequence. So what that means is if this agent happens to be on your top agents list that you're importing for multiple months back to back, if we choose once, they're only going to be entered into this sequence one time. And then we can go ahead and click on Add Start. And then we would be able to add that one-to-one email. And you can see now that little pop-up has disappeared, warning us that they weren't going to get this one-to-one email because the automation did not have a deal-based start trigger. So let's say we didn't have this here, right? So let's go ahead and see if we can delete this start trigger. And let's go ahead and put that one-to-one email back in. So essentially what this is saying is you could still save this and it would appear as though the email is in the sequence, but because we don't have it properly configured right now with a deal-based start trigger, even though the email is going to show as a step, they're going to skip over it. They're not going to get that email. So it does truly need to be tied into a deal start trigger. So now let's make this a little bit more complex and let's see how we would use this in a practical sense when it comes to prospecting. Most of the time when it comes to prospecting, we're going to be talking about importing a spreadsheet of agents that you're not currently working with. It may be the top 1,000 agents in your area, the top 20%, maybe just a list of like 10,000 agents that you got from your MLS that you want to import into the CRM and start marketing to. Well, during that import process, we need to do something that tells the system to begin this process of entering them into the automation for prospecting, right? And we saw here that the start trigger is going to be that the deal stage changes, or I'm sorry, in this case, we're going to do enters a pipeline, and we're going to choose that the pipeline they're entering is prospecting. And we'll say runs once. However, one thing that you'll notice when you're importing a list of contacts, and let's go ahead and import here. Let's import from file. And let's see if we can just choose, let's choose something random. So a CSV that really has nothing to do with this demo, but just to have something to go off of. So you can see here, these are our options as we're importing this file. We can add them to a list, we can add tags, and then we check this box for update existing contacts while importing, or we leave it unchecked depending on the situation. Nowhere here does it say enter them into a deal or a pipeline or a stage. So that's not going to automatically trigger this automation when you import this list of contacts. And what we always recommend is that you add a tag, and that tag is what tells the system what needs to happen. So in this case, we may call this top agents import, and then let's say that's it, right? We're just going to call it top agent import, or we could call it something like top agent prospecting or just prospecting. The name of the tag doesn't really matter as long as it means something to you, and you're going to use that tag to tell the system what to do next. So we're adding this tag top agent import to this list of agents that we're pulling in, and then we would click on import now. But although we've added that tag, we don't have anything right now that's telling the system because the tag is added, a follow-up action needs to happen, and we want that follow-up action to be tied into this automation that we're building, right, for prospecting. So here's what we have to do, is we have to create another automation. And I know you're thinking, man, we have to create an automation to trigger an automation, but hopefully it'll make sense as we go through this process. So let's go ahead and start this one from scratch. So the start trigger for this automation is going to be that the tag is added for whatever we're choosing when we import this list of contacts. So in this case, if it's top agent import, I'm going to add that and click on add start. So now, once we're done building this automation and we make it active, the next time we import a list of agents and add this tag top agent import and then click on import now, it's going to automatically start them down this automation. Now, the reason why we can't do that over here is because remember that one-to-one email is only going to work if it's a deal trigger that starts the automation. So we can't have that tag trigger start this automation, otherwise the one-to-one email is not going to work. So in this case, we're using the tag here. Now, some other things we may want to do is segment the contacts entering this automation. So for example, in that top agent list that you got, you may have agents there that are already working with you. And so you obviously don't want to start sending them emails saying, I'd love to earn your business if that agent already, you already have their business. So here what we can say is we only want to add agents into this sequence if their number of inspections lifetime is 0, right? So they've never worked with you. They may already exist in the system because maybe they were in your ISN or your Spectora or whatever you use for scheduling. Maybe you already had them in there, so it was part of the initial import we did when we set your account up, even though you've never worked with them before. And now that they're on a top agent list, even though they already exist in the system, we still want to make sure that they're going down this sequence. So we're going to say number of inspections as BA lifetime is 0, or we're going to say number of inspections as BA lifetime is blank, because there's a chance when we imported these agents that there was nothing in that field for their lifetime inspection count, so it's just going to be blank within the CRM. So essentially what this is telling the CRM is that when it sees a contact has the tag added top agent import, and they've never worked with you before on the buyer side, so their number of inspections is 0 or blank, that's when we want to continue them down this automation. If an agent has that tag added during the import process, but they don't match the other two conditions, they're just not going to go down this automation. They're going to stop and exit the automation right off the bat. So now we know that the agents who are going down this automation, they're the right agents, right? They're the ones that we want to market to, and they're the ones that we want to enter into the other automation that's going to send them whatever steps we put in. It might be a mix of the automated emails, might be a mix of text messages, tasks being created to call them, but then also the one-to-one emails that we want to use. So what we have to do to trigger that is we're going to come over here to CRM, and we're going to add a deal. And so we're going to give this deal a title, and we may just want to call it something like prospecting. And then let's personalize it by clicking this silhouette and putting the contact's first name. You can also add a value. Now, this may be a little bit harder to quantify right now because you don't know. I mean, this agent's never worked with you, right? So you don't know if they're going to work with you. And if they do decide to work with you, what the value of that inspection is going to be. So if you already know your average agent's lifetime value, you can put that in here just so you can see the opportunity that you have with them. Otherwise, you can leave it blank. Now, the pipeline we're going to enter them into is prospecting. And we already have some stages built out. In this case, it would be cold because we're doing our initial import of the list of agents that have never heard of us. And then we can choose the owner based on the users that are in your system. So now we're going to go ahead and save. And then it's going to give us some suggested actions, but in this case, we're just going to end. And the reason is the whole purpose of this automation is just to make sure that the right agents are added into the automation that we're going to actually build in the different prospecting steps. So because we're adding this deal here in the prospecting pipeline, this automation is going to see that the contact enters the pipeline prospecting, right? So we have our deal trigger starting this automation, which means our one-to-one email is now going to work properly. So I know it kind of seems like a convoluted process, right? As far as why we have to build 2 automations to make this work properly if we want to use the one-to-one email. But it's just because the CRM says that in order for them to get this email, the automation has to be triggered based on something tied to a deal. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully it gives you a little bit more insight into the purpose of the one-to-one email, the power that it can have when you're trying to personalize your outreach, and then the process that we need to take in order to set up this automation properly. But if you have any questions after you watch this, as always, feel free to reach out.